Welcome everyone. This is our fourth community session for Spotify, or sorry, for Backstage. And I'm Adam Stevenson. I work for Spotify. I'm a product manager, and I'm fairly new, but I'm excited to be helping host this week or this month. It's been exciting getting to work with you all so far. And see the momentum of Backstage and the way that things have been growing. So for this month, let me open up our agenda. All right. So for agenda today, first the maintainers are going to go through some updates, give some context about some recent RFCs. Then we're going to jump into some demos. We're going to do first, there's a demo from Splunk about AWS S3 URL reader, and then a few demos around TechDoc search. From there, we're going to jump into a plugin spotlight, which we're going to try to do monthly. And yeah, from that, we'll highlight who's the contributor of the month, which will be a lot of fun. And we'll get into some Q&A at the end, which we have a few questions lined up, but you're always welcome to add more questions either to the issue on GitHub or directly into the chat here on Zoom. So with that said, is Patrick or Freben available to start by giving us some updates on recent RFCs?
I am available, Patrick. Do you want to share them while you had the screen up? Maybe I can link them so we don't need to set up
that would be good.
Sharing.
Sure, that's fine.
Yep. So the first update is on the identity to ownership V2 RFC, which we just closed out. This has essentially ended up in us going with the design of having users and groups in the catalog, which was a thing previously, but to tying these quite loosely to each other. And the real output is that as part in the auth backend, we are implementing a pattern of sign-in resolvers. So it's essentially a way for how you, using code in your organization, can do a mapping of a logged in identity to a set of things that logged in identity owns. You can do a lot with it. We provide some helpers that makes it quite simple. So, given a Google email, you can look up something in the catalog, look up a user in the catalog, and then kind of just hook up the ownership like that. But yeah, so this RFC is essentially closed out with that way forward. Yes, and the other one, the future of locations. So let me bring that up in chat as well. And this one was an old one. It's actually exactly 1 year ago that this RFC was opened, 18th of August, 2020. And this one was really about new ideas for the catalog and where we're going, where we want to go with catalogs, the catalog at that point. We ended up doing a big catalog rework around halfway through this. So early spring, we changed a lot about how catalog processing worked. Locations are processed individually now, as opposed to everything being processed at once, which was a big kind of discussion point in this RFC as well. And let's see. Yeah, that is really the big way that we close that RFC, but there are more updates coming on this topic. So we are looking at the processing API and how we want entities in the catalog to ultimately end up in the catalog. So we're looking at entity providers as a way of kind of bringing bigger batches of entities into the catalog, such as for the LDAP processor. But the original RFC is really closed with this new way of processing in the catalog. And I believe we will get back to the topic of the processors a bit later.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, the next thing on our agenda is a demo from Splunk. Is there someone on the call that can jump in?
Hello. Hi. Yeah,
Hey,
I'd
Sean.
like to demo something good. Hi. Yeah.
All right.
So
Let me get you presenter access here.
So we just wanted to quickly show that this exists now as a URL reader. Quick little introduction. My name is Sean Tan. I'm a site reliability engineering intern on Splunk's SRE, inside Splunk's SRE organization. This is a partner project with another intern named Kira Jost, and she completed her internship last week. So unfortunately, she's not here to co-present. Yeah, this was our summer project, was to get hopefully an AWS S3 URL reader inside, contributed upstream to Backstage. So the background, Ping Phone Book is Splunk's instance of Backstage. That's just the internal name for it. Currently, the component files are stored statically, like you would see in the picture below. And the app config, there's just a dump of where these component files are saved locally. So my manager and the SRE org as a whole thought there could be a better way of pulling those more dynamically. Hopefully, on a hosted service like Amazon or Google GCS. So we thought what best fit our needs was to build something out that could read from an S3 bucket on Amazon. There wasn't, as far as we knew, functionality that existed in Backstage yet. So there's room for that to build. So we built out what we call, or what is called, the AWS S3 URL reader. It's an implementation of URL reader. So it has all the methods that would normally be there in that interface. Currently only read, and by extension read URL is implemented. So one file at a time, point to one file at a time. It was the magic or the interesting part of the S3 URL reader, outside of the others maybe, is that it's using the Amazon S3 AWS SDK, specifically the S3 library, and the magic happens with a method called getObject, which returns the body of the file that you are pulling from and the metadata around it, such as like e-tags here and there. So what that would look like inside app config, it's using the URL reader processor. So it's matching on type URL, and then the target is just a file path URL on the bucket. And then you can also do this through the user interface. So future work on this project is we'd love to implement retree in the reader. So we could successfully, with one call to the reader, we can pull more than one file. And to build out a new type, instead of going through the URL reader path, we would build a processor that would match on a type in the app config that would call retree through the reader. So we could point not just to one file in the app config, but point to, let's say, the root of a bucket or a subdirectory in the bucket that could, be hosting more than one file. And then this is just who we are. I made an introduction before, but I guess more importantly, this is Kira, who we were pretty 50-50 split on the work done here. So thank you very much to Kira. And I can demo real quick just what the reader might look like in the local instance of Backstage. So as you can see here, I have in the app config, in the locations target, something pointing to my local bucket, and inside it has a component file called workshop component. And I have the credentials that I would need configured to access the bucket, like access key, secret access key. ARN, role ARNs are also supported. So as you can see in the all catalog or section of the service catalog, we have workshop pulled out. fully integrated as you would expect. And this lives inside a S3 bucket that I have hosted under my name. So that's all I would like to share today, and just bring awareness that this exists now. So thank you all.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sean. Yeah, so I guess the next thing on our agenda is to get into some tech doc search demos. I think the first one on our agenda is from Eric.
Yeah, happy to get us started, and then I will pass it on to SDA SE, either one of you two who are on the call that I know, but I can get started. If you can give me screen share access, please. Hey, again, everyone, while this is loading, give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen. Awesome. So I'm Eric, I work at Spotify. You may remember 2 community sessions ago that we sort of introduced the Backstage Search platform, where we provided some basic functionality to search the catalog. But the bigger thing that we wanted to get across was that this was an extensible system that the community could build on top of to solve the challenges that they face in Backstage with respect to search. And since then, exactly that has happened, where we have seen contributions specifically in the areas of tech docs and searching within tech docs, and the ability to support multiple search engines, because we shipped with just like a developer-friendly in-memory database to begin with. So just to sort of make things concrete, now you can go to the search page and you can filter to tech docs, and then this will actually search all of your tech docs sites that you have loaded, not just a single tech doc site, but all of them. And you can get specific pages that you want to land on and land directly there, which is super cool. Community contributed, really, really very much appreciated. Coming soon, there's a PR open right now that's in review that will add a search bar like here, where you could search just this site like you could in a normal MKDocs kind of world. All of this right now is built on top of the one that I'm demoing here, is just like a local in-memory database called Lunr. And it's really only intended as like a development platform for building out this type of experience and the process of indexing these types of documents. But it's not really suited for production. And the community has also been working on making it suitable for production. And I guess I will use that as a segue into Postgres as a search engine, which was contributed by SDA SE. So passing it along to y'all to talk about that a little more.
Thanks, Eric. Oliver here from SDA SE and Dominic, and we are working, or we have worked on the Postgres implementation. So as Eric already told you, the Lunr implementation is not really suited for production use because the single-threaded nature of Node.js makes it like performance-wise quite hard to use it in production if you have like a bigger catalog that you want to index. And therefore we thought about what would be the next option that we have, and that's maybe Postgres if you're already using Postgres in the backend, and that's also where it plays really nice. Just give me a second, I will share my screen. You have the ability to use your normal Postgres configuration that you already have in your production instance probably, and you can start it that way. And if you have the current setup, how it's done in Backstage in the example app, if you take a look at the example app in the backend, we have the initialization that supports both Lunr as a fallback, but Postgres if you have support for it, for example, if you have it configured. And then it's just like before with Lunr, you actually see no big difference. You can just search, but now it's backend based search where you have a Postgres database in the background. Just as a proof, if you look here, that's the Postgres database that's created that contains all index entries. Yeah, there's one limitation about the whole approach. If you want to use Postgres, it's required that you have at least Postgres 12. Before yesterday in the documentation, we said 11, and also the check was checking for 11, but you need Postgres 12 and newer. We are using it in production, it works great, and yeah, for our catalog size, it's well suited. And that's where the point where I hand over to Rowley, which also implemented a database engine.
Thank you, Oliver. My name is David Chute. I am the founder of a company called Rowley. We do Backstage as a service, and we contributed Elasticsearch support for TechDoc search recently, and I'm going to show you a quick demo of that, which is going to look pretty much exactly like the previous demos you just saw, but worth doing quickly anyway. Let me just share the right thing. Okay, so the first thing to say is that this was contributed by UC Halila, who's an engineer at Rowley. He's currently on a cycling tour around the southwest of Finland, so he wasn't able to demo this, but hopefully I'll suffice. So I have a local Backstage instance here. I have a catalog component in it. It has some documentation, and you can see I have the word NSA in this documentation. So if I go to search, hopefully this works. I should be able to search for NSA and get some results. Okay, just like you'd expect. Now, just to prove I'm not cheating, I'm going to go to this elastic.co service. It's a hosted Elasticsearch solution. And you can see that the software catalog and the TechDocs indexes exist. And if I go to the kind of query interface here, I should be able to run this, and you can see some documents have been indexed, and I have those indexes in place. The configuration for this is quite simple. Basically, you just need to put something like this into your app config. So you can see I'm basically putting in a pointer to my Elasticsearch instance. It doesn't need to be hosted on elastic.co. It could be on AWS or running locally. As long as it's a standard Elasticsearch interface, it should work perfectly fine. And I just have some authentication details here, just to authenticate with the cluster. In terms of pros and cons for this, it will be more scalable than Postgres. So, Postgres will probably suffice for most organizations and probably handle tens of thousands of documents quite easily. But if you have something more significant than that, then Elasticsearch will be a little bit better. It will likely query a little bit quicker, especially at those large index sizes. And then this is theoretical right now, but I expect it should have slightly better search results just because it's a dedicated query engine for NoSQL documents. The downside, of course, with this is that Postgres is, pretty much almost required at this point with Backstage, whereas you need to run an extra Elasticsearch cluster in order to query TechDocs using the Elasticsearch integration. And then the last thing to mention is we wrote or published a blog post which kind of compares some of the different search engines for this, and so you can see Lunr and Postgres and Elasticsearch. I'll share this in the chat in a second, but if you want to read a little bit more, this might be useful.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Eric, Oliver, and David for the awesome demos. Super cool to see this coming to life. So next on the agenda, we have a plugin spotlight. So let me just share my screen again. I assume you can see it at this point. All right. So what we'd like to do is share a little bit of information about a plugin and in each community session, and just basically highlight a plugin and give a little bit more context about what it solves and some of the information behind it in each session here. So for this month, we're going to talk about XC metrics, which was contributed by the Foundation Squad at Spotify. And I believe we have Nicholas on the call that's going to give a little bit of information about it.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can share my screen.
You should be good.
Okay, my Zoom is not configured for this, apparently. Could I maybe send the presentation and someone else share it, maybe?
Sure.
I'll just send it to you. Sorry about that. Always new installation and the system preference thing I have to do. But
just need you to give me access, that's all.
Oh, sorry. Let's see. Now you should be good. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Niklas. I'm an intern at Spotify this summer. As mentioned, I worked with the Foundation Squad, which works with infrastructure for iOS. So I'm going to just quickly tell you a bit about this plugin and the Xmetrics system that's been developed before, and I've done the plugin now this summer as a project. So we could go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So just for you who don't know, Xmetrics, it's a software for parsing, storing, and collecting build blocks from Xcode. So the developer machines upload the log. They are then parsed and structured and stored in a Postgres database. And before the plugin, there was no user interface except for the Postgres database. So you had to build your own. So the idea behind the plugin here is to provide a good starting point for a user interface that's easy to set up and make it easier to get started with the Xmetrics tool and to gain some insights from the build systems. Yeah, we could go to the next one. I have some screenshots from the plugin so you can see what it's all about. So here we see just the starting point overview page. We have like a matrix that shows the latest couple of hundred builds and their status. So there are a lot of successful builds here and some failed ones. Just to give a good overview of what's the current status of the build system for all developers. We also have a quick overview of the latest 10 builds in the table below that. And we can go 2 slides forward, maybe. And one more. Perfect. Oh, sorry, there was a kind of delay. If you go back one step. Thanks. So there's also the sidebar here where you can see some trends for a couple of different periods. So now it's 14 days. You can see the average build time for the 50th percentile and below, and error rate, and also the total build count for every day. And then at the bottom, we have some more statistics just to get a good reference of what's happening in the build system. For example, build count total for these 14 days, the average time, and so on. Yeah, we could go on. please, next one. Perfect. If yeah, so we have two tabs on the top nav. So if you have using the overview page, and this is the builds page. So this is basically a table where you can see, you can browse all the stored builds in the Axiometrics tool. So here's just an entry point for getting more information and digging deeper into the metrics, project schema, time, duration, hosts, and some additional information if it was a CI build or not. And of course, we can filter this as well. So if we go to the next slide, please. So yeah, we have some filters. The most common one would probably be the dates. So the starting date and the end date to filter from. Also the status of each build. So if you want to see all failed builds for 1 week or for last year or whatever, it's possible to choose here. And you can also filter on the project. So it's a really easy way to get some more insights, and you can see how many builds that fall under these filters as well. We can move on to the next, please. Perfect. So you can also expand a row here and get some more details. So for example, here we have all the metadata in the left side here, which is more or less what you see in the table as well. But maybe more interesting one is on the right side, where you can, we have some panels where you can expand and see what's done. You can see all the individual warnings and errors. I think if you click next slide, we can probably see here. All right, okay, yeah, it's another order, but one good thing about this is it's also available as a separate page. So if you just go to like Axiometrics /build /the ID of the build, you can see all the details which you can see when you expand the table row. And that's very good if you want to share with someone else. You want to you have a problem or you want them to take a look, you can just share the URL and they can access all the information directly. So that's a pretty neat feature, I think. Now we can go to the next. Yeah, here is some additional information about the host. So this is the hosts panel expanded, and there's a lot more. If you were to have some more screen states, you can see some more information. But yeah, all the information collected by Axiometrics is shown here about the host. And if we go to the next one, we can probably see some warnings. So yeah, here I have two really quite boring warnings, but just to show the content of the warnings panel. And yeah, so this lists the warning for the build, and you can also click on them to expand if they are longer, so it doesn't fill the screen. And I think the last one, maybe if we click next, yeah, you can also see the timeline for each target in the build. So in this one, we have just one target, which is called Basic App, which is an example project which comes with Axiometrics. But if you have some more targets, you can see like how they are processed in parallel or if they are sequential. And you can also see there are 2 bars for every target. So the gray one at the top is the build time, and the blue one is the compile time. So some builds could potentially have a longer build time than compile time, and then the resources are probably not super efficiently used. So that's a good starting point just to see the timing of the information. Yeah, and if you go to the next one. Perfect. Yeah, that was all I had to show now, and there's a lot of more information on xmetrics.io if you want to read more about it too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicholas. That's great. So the next thing on our agenda for today is our monthly contributor spotlight. And Himanshu, I think we really need to get the drum roll thing going on. But without further ado, the the contributor for this month that we would like to highlight to show how just how much dedication and creative contributions that we're getting to the community throughout the month is Oliver Sand, known as Fox32. And you probably know Oliver. He's been contributing for some time now, is a Hall of Famer. And the last month, he's been working on PostgreSQL, as you saw, in the search beta milestone. And yeah, the contributions are very much appreciated. Oliver, I don't know if you want to say a few things to the community.
Yes, thank you for the spotlight. Yeah, I just checked, and we are already contributing for a year. I think we started last summer, and we got quite far internally with what we wanted to do, and Backstage also got quite far at that time and helped us a lot in the topic, and it's always nice to work together with you and the community. Thanks for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's great work, and we really appreciate it. So let me stop my share here. The next thing we have on our agenda is to get into some Q&A. So I think we should probably start with our issues. So the first comment that we see here is from Riz Blake, and it's, are there any updates about the homepage? Is there someone that can jump on and give a little bit of context there?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Can you hear me fine?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Right, so we had this big PR where we introduced kind of well, some basic proof of concept basically for how we intend for it to work. So that's been merged now. So now we have that kind of that infrastructure. And there's still some pretty fundamental things we want to add. So the API is not quite there yet, but we have something in the works, and I'll probably share the news in the original RFC by Mr. Community Session Award winner Oliver Sand. So you'll hear more shortly.
Cool. So the next question on our list here is, so I don't know how to pronounce this username, but Duff Cruel, I'm going to try. Duff Cruel is saying they're interested in finding out more about diagram formats that are supported in tech docs, particularly in light of this article here from Rody, and also this issue here. Do we have someone that wants to jump on and say a few words?
Well, I guess I wrote that article. Yeah, so it seems you can add iframes into tech docs inline, and it'll just render them on the page. So I found that kind of useful because we have kind of sequence diagrams and architecture diagrams that we like to kind of update on the fly, and it's handy to get them into Backstage tech docs straight away. So it can be a nice pattern depending on what type of graphics you want to show on your tech docs page. So hence I wrote that article.
Yeah, maybe I can just say Gary Neiman here. Hi everyone. Spotify. Yeah, internally we support GraphViz and Plant UML. And I'm not sure, I thought we supported Plant UML in open source. That's my understanding. Maybe one of the engineers can just confirm that, or not.
Yes, we do. We should do at least, if not broken. But Plant UML and GraphViz. And then for some other diagrams, we in the team have been using a extension to our VS Code, Draw.io, which is possible to just use SVG of that diagram, also possible to embed on a tech docs page. So that's pretty cool as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, the next question on our list here is from Terrace. And so there's actually a few of them here. Is Terrace on the call and want to give some context, or should I just go ahead?
I'm here. I can do it. So we have one of our clients has maybe the biggest data list of data sources, and also the biggest data sources possibly. I don't know. And this, I guess, one of the things that I want to find out is who else has huge, like hundreds, or I think we have 250,000 entries that are going to be going into the data store. So I want to find out who else has this much data, and if there are any best practices around processors that are developing, because we seem to be kind of inventing these patterns by going through the Backstage repo and then just kind of looking at the challenges that we have. But I want to find out, what do we know? And in the process, there's a thread that was started in Discord on the support channel. It's called Huge Catalog, and I got a lot more information about the new entity provider. So we're looking at that now. But I guess this is the area that I'd like to absorb as much information about this as possible, because this is the biggest processing all this data is the biggest challenge that we need to deal with right now.
So possibly I could dive into answers to some of those questions, and then if anyone is running a particularly large catalog, they could chime in afterwards. We are running a somewhat large one internally. I think it scales in a couple of different dimensions. So we have a somewhat large organization, and that's one of the things that the catalog, one of the pieces of scaling that we're looking at. How big graphs of entities can you have? Because it's one thing to have 100,000 entities in the catalog, and it's another one to have 10,000 that all relate to each other. The latter one tends to be worse, but it kind of depends on what you're doing. So very short term, we're looking at just looking at the last question here from a performance perspective. We're looking at introducing caching and enabling a caching system for the processors, so that the catalog processor can store a piece of data and then get that piece of data back on the next round of processing. And that's kind of ending up as our main system for avoiding network requests and expensive computations in the processors. So once we introduce that, that will very much be something that you want to be using for any expensive computations or high latency things. We recently did, and we released the new catalog just before summer. We're coming back from vacation and kind of looking now at where are the pain points. So we did just do some updates to how this piece, the stitching, as we call it in the catalog, how that works, and especially when it happens, because it's a somewhat expensive computation. Internally, we took a graph that looked like a big sawtooth down to a flat line, which in this case is good, by basically enabling caching of the stitching and avoiding unnecessary work. And we're just constantly looking at places where we can do those optimizations. Best practices. I have so there are a few updates to the API read location, that method. If you're implementing a reader, don't use read location. Do the reading in the post process hook instead. But these are all quite minor things, to be honest. I don't have any big best practice except for, once caching is introduced, then it's going to be use that. Antipatterns, to be honest, I don't have anything here either that I can think of. If anyone has any Any particular ones I'd like to hear?
I can share one based on what we've seen, because the team went ahead and created a bunch of processors. I think one of the things that that seems like an anti-pattern is treating the processing system like a task, like a queue of tasks. It seems a little crazy, but I think it seems like a really natural thing where you just like throw a bunch of things that need to be done and just expect it to do it. And I think that the whole pipe like treating it as a pipeline and thinking about caching and thinking about these processes in a really granular way, because they seem to be really it seems like this is one of those things you need to be really thoughtful about, because if you start to just kind of like do things and then you'll find out that things stop working, and that's what we found, especially with the what's kind of accelerated this whole process in a project that we're helping with is we did an upgrade, and all of a sudden every flaw of the processor came to light and things just ground to a halt. So yeah, so that's one of the things that we're seeing. But thanks for Backstage team for being helpful in this, and we're definitely we're already spiking out the NC provider for GitHub Enterprise to get the injection going there. I
can add two things that I thought of now. So yeah, keep the computation small if possible. Once we introduce cacheable processing, a pattern that we have in mind as well is to not necessarily always just store data, but you can store a point when you want to do another refresh as well. If you are, for example, polling an external system and doing it in a very expensive way, you can store a timestamp that's 5 hours in the future for when you want to do it next time, and store that in the cache, because the processing loop runs pretty tightly, once every couple of minutes, depending on how you configure it typically. But that's a way to run much more expensive tasks less often. And then the other one, it is entity providers. To be honest, if people want to explore them with us, like you, we're very open to doing that. There's no proper documentation and so on for it just yet. It's a space for exploring. Freben is right now working on an entity provider for the LDAP processor, so moving the LDAP processor over to be an entity provider instead. And just as a quick explanation of entity providers, it's instead of having a location that gets processed and outputs a bunch of entities, it's a thing that you configure up in code as a source of entities for the catalog, and it's the equivalent of the static configuration or the location database. Those two are actually implemented as entity providers right now. So it's a much more like tighter and integration where you have higher control of when entities get pushed into the catalog.
Is there any changes to the role of locations with the NC provider, or is it the same, just different API?
You can skip them, right? So for the LDAP processor, there probably won't be any actual location entity generated at all. It would just straight up output user and group entities and skip location altogether.
One of the patterns that I've been trying to think of how to explain these things to the team, because trying to kind of identify the problems that they had with the existing providers. And one of the thoughts that I had is to think of the locations as a reference to a specific data. So for example, one of the things we've seen is like we had locations that had paginated source, like paginated links, and so what I was recommending is essentially treating each location as a separate as a reference to a resource, so it would emit the same data. I wonder if so that's one of the patterns that seems to make sense to me. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
I think maybe that's one to pick up on Discord afterwards, to not get too much in the weeds, because it sounds like we need to dig in a bit to give a proper answer.
And maybe Patrick, Francesco here, maybe Patrick, this could be also a good topic for next community session, just to exchange some experience. Tara can share a lot, I think, and we can lead the conversation and maybe provide some insights. It sounds also from the comments in the chat that it's a really interesting topic for most of the audience.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Cool. Awesome. So just to sort of follow up on the chat that's been happening here, for those following along later on, Zachary was asking if they understood the relationship between entities, and they're more costly than processing an entity by itself. And so Freben has sort of explained that it might be better for us to get deeper into the topic on Discord, or to follow up in a future session. I don't know if there's anything sort of quick and easy that Freben wants to mention here, but I'm happy to move on if not.
I know Freben is in a noisy environment, but basically when you have relations, if you connect the entire graph, there's one step of the processing that is done per entity, and then there's a second step, the stitching, which is done for every entity in the graph, for every individual entity. So for every single one of those 10,000, you trigger 10,000 stitches, and that happens 10,000 times.
Right. Cool. So the other question, which has been answered in chat, I think, but we should definitely bring up, is from Julio. And they said, is there anything within Backstage already in production or in the works to provide self-paced tutorial-like documentation along the lines of Codelabs developer.google.com? And I think Tim gave an answer in here. Tim, do you want to quickly talk about that?
Sure, yeah. Just looking for some clarification, I guess, on exactly what you're asking about. I can mention that internally at Spotify, for new joiners, we have what are called golden paths. And this is basically a walkthrough to teach them how to get accustomed to the Spotify environment and infrastructure. And these are basically just tech docs, articles that are put through, a series of pages and have instructions for setting up your environment and all that sort of thing. Yeah, there's a link to some information about that. And we're also interested in making some tutorials for Backstage itself to get people onboarded and used to the concepts and things like that. So that's something we're looking into at Spotify.
Hi, sorry, excuse me, it's me. I asked a question I maybe should have interrupted before. So I was more interested around the concept of like tracking how much time people are on these pages and so on and so forth. For instance, here at SoundCloud, we use these Codelabs very extensively, exactly as kind of like even a product that our developer experience organization delivers to other engineers. So, with Codelabs, you have kind of like a personalized experience over where people drop, in which section people spend the most amount of time, which could be confusing. We use that to feed back into our documentation efforts to actually make the documentation better, right? As kind of like tutorials that can get better by themselves with things like tracking, cooking, analytics, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's cool. I imagine you could do kind of a primitive version of that using Google Analytics and Tech Talks, just using URLs and time on page and such, but I don't know of any more sophisticated solution for that in Backstage right now.
If I could piggyback off of that. So here at Splunk, we have a internal workshops platform sort of thing that we've created. And as you'd expect, we Splunk all the data. So we have that, and we were considering open sourcing that. And so I think this gives me one more point to bring up with our team. So thanks for that.
Great. Well, thank you. Is there anything I missed here? Does anyone have any further questions or comments? Okay. So first, we have a few call to actions here before we end the call. First, we'd love feedback about our session. So we have a form here that I pasted into the chat. We'd love to get your feedback on how we're doing and how we can improve. You can also add yourself to the adopters list, which is here. And watch out for updates in the community repository. All right. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to see you all again next month. Have a great rest of your summer.